Good morning or afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar, What to Expect in the Latest Adaptive Insights Update. I'm Megan Turco, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon, or morning, depending on where you are. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use the webinar console. The orange arrow on the right side of your screen will let you toggle the control tray open or closed, and at the bottom of that control tray, you'll see a chat window. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar via the chat function, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar. Additionally, on your GoToWebinar console, you should see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please choose the Use Telephone option. And alternatively, if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. Additionally, I do want to note that today's webinar is being recorded. We'll go ahead and send out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording of the webinar within 48 hours. Please keep an eye out for this email if you're interested in accessing the webinar after today or sharing it with any colleagues who couldn't make it live with us today. And with that, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Amy Morgan. Amy is a certified adaptive implementer and a senior manager on Armanino's Adaptive Insights team. She leads projects from pre-sales through implementation and all the way through to support. Her experience with Fortune 100 FP&A companies, coupled with 8 years of implementation and training, make Amy one of the foremost adaptive experts. It's great to have you with us here today, Amy, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Megan. Today we're going to just go over Adaptive's newest release features from the 2015.1 and .2 updates. One of the features in the update is the dimension attribute, so we're going to take a little bit more of a deep dive in that one feature, and then we're going to be previewing the next round of updates. Go ahead, Brian. Okay, thanks. So just doing a quick review of the first update, one of the things that came out were a lot more navigation shortcuts. I went ahead and highlighted the ones I thought were most helpful, the ones I've personally been using quite a bit. What I find is with these sheet navigation updates or navigation shortcuts, if you want to go and jump to a cell, in general you need to hold down the control key. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that when we want to actually extend our selected range, we tend to use shift. So if you see here, a lot of these are prefixed with a shift. So you go shift home, it brings you all the way to the first column of where you are. Probably the most helpful one is actually very subtle, just shift and then the upper arrow key. So I know these have been around for a little while, and these are probably something already on your radar, so just wanted to ask a quick polling question. And that is, which of these shortcuts have you found save you the most time? And we even gave you a few options. And this just helps us see and also give feedback to Adaptive on what people are finding is the most helpful.
So it looks like we've got about 60% voted in so far. So we'll give everyone a few more moments here to get their answers in, and then we'll discuss those answers. So it looks like we're almost there, and we will go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. And Amy will get the answers up on the screen for you. There you go.
Ah, okay, I'm a little surprised. So the end, moving to the last cell in the row, very helpful when dealing with large amounts of data, and shift control end, going to the last cell on the sheet. So it looks like a lot of the feedback is in going to the very end. And then other, and whoever filled in other, if you wouldn't mind typing in what the most helpful one is in the chat box, I would love to hear. We can move on. All right. So in the first release, they also introduced dimensionalized actuals. And what this does is it allows us to have cube GL accounts. And in these cube GL accounts, we can have data that we're entering in a cube sheet, and it goes straight into the regular GL account. Basically, in the past, when we did want to enter dimensionalized data, what we found is that the dimensions didn't line up between actuals and forecast. So you go and you look in your forecast version, you've got your dimension and your splits all worked out, and then you go, oh no, the dimension doesn't really line up in the actuals portion of that forecast. So what this allows you to do is enter that data into the cube, and that way in the cube you'd be able to see the dimension line up between the actuals and the forecast version. It's a nice little new piece of functionality, but we do see some advantages to it. We don't have to have formulas or links set up from the cube to the GL, and it does give us drillable transactions. However, some of the cautions we see are that it's data only. We're not able to, for sales, if we made sales a cube GL account, we wouldn't be able to say, well, we're going to forecast that by units times price, because this GL cube account is a standard account. We can't make it a formula. Also, if there's some times for this GL account where you don't need the dimensions, you can't just enter things on the standard sheet. That account must be entered on the cube sheet. For that reason, what we'd recommend is going ahead and just testing this with custom accounts. And another caution we're going to put out there is if you do take an existing GL account, you say, well, I want to make it a cube GL account, that process will erase your actuals and your budget data. So we'd say if you're revising something already in place, be cautious, and if you're building something new, go ahead and test that with custom accounts. Let's move on. And finally, we have from the first release this year, the freeform dashboard. For those of you with Discovery, one of the popular dials to use in Discovery was the P&L scorecard, but it was very rigid in the format. The first column had to be the account, next column had to be actuals, then one of the budget versions, and then it would give you a variance and a zone. And this format you see here is very regimented. Now with the new format, what it allows you to do is really select what you want in the scorecard. You can have up to 3 sections. So a section would be something like month and quarter to date. And you can have up to 7 columns in each section. So really 21 possible scorecard columns. Also, there's some additional configurations available. You can now configure variances to be values, % of anything, anytime, any version. So a little more flexibility built into Discovery. Let's move on to the second release. So in the second release, something I'm sure everyone has seen and noticed is the search function on the standard sheet. So if you go on the standard sheet, you can just type in this case I typed in rent and clicked enter, and it brought me to equipment rental, which was the first instance of this. And if you notice over to the right, there's kind of that up caret and down caret. The down caret will then bring you to the next instance. So if I click the down caret, in this case, it would bring me down to line 60, other equipment rental. So that's how the search function works. Going on to the next feature, we have the multi-instance refresh. For those of you who are in a multi-instance environment, you formerly had to refresh each linked level one at a time, and this would be quite tedious if you had 100 linked levels. Now you can just click on one refresh button and all of those linked levels will update at once. Okay, in preparation for the next piece of update number 2, I have a question for you, and it's, do you have any dimensions with a large number of values? And these are some pretty common dimensions folks have.
And for this particular poll, everyone is welcome to, of course, select any of them that apply. We know that question could apply to a few different dimensions for you guys. So it looks like we've got about 35% voted so far. Oh, the numbers are jumping up pretty quickly here. And actually, for everyone who has already put in their votes for this particular polling question, now would be a great time to submit any questions that you have from Amy's content so far that she's discussed. If you do have any questions, go ahead and feel free to submit those in the chat window. So it looks like we have most of our folks have voted in here, so we'll go ahead and close the poll in about 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, we have product, job title, customer, and location. Well, my example I'm going to be using uses product, but I'll try to tailor my comments to also talking about job title and customer. So going on to the next slide, one of the new features in the second release I'm actually extremely excited about, and it's dimension attributes. What this allows us to do is really set up a relationship within the dimension. And rather than trying to explain it theoretically, I find it easiest just to explain through an example. So in the past, if someone had a product dimension and then they had to group the products and they wanted to see things by group, we would set up a hierarchical dimension where we'd say the dimension has a group A. Under group A, it has product A1, A2. Under group B, it has product B1, B2, etc. That became a little tedious when you're trying to enter data. You're constantly having to look at all these roll-ups you might not want to see while you're entering data. And sometimes folks would say, well, I have group A, group B, group C, but then I also have other ways I need to categorize that same dimension. So now we have our dimension attributes. What we do here now is we have a dimension where we simply say product, A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3. And then behind the scenes, we can set up properties, and we can say product A1 belongs to group A, product B1 belongs to group B. And now I can look at this same cube sheet and I could say, okay, show me this quantity data, but show it to me by group. And as you see over on the right now, I can see that old hierarchy. Again, one of the pros is I can look at the data without any hierarchy over on the left, or I can see it within this hierarchy of groups. You go, okay, well, that's nice, but not that big of a deal. If we go to the next slide, we can see that we can have an alternate relationship set up. So now I can say with my products, I can also identify, let's say, where they're being manufactured. And in this case, I can say, you know, products A1, B1, and C2 are manufactured in China, but the other products are manufactured in Taiwan. And I can simply now say in my cube sheet, I want you to show me my quantities in this case, but I want you to group them by manufacturing plant rather than by product group. So what we have is an ability to have a dimension that can be very flat, and we can have alternate ways of rolling it up. Going on to the next slide, just to articulate the benefits of the dimension attributes, it gives us very agile reporting. We're able to view things without rollups. We're able to view things with alternate rollups. Also makes for simpler planning. A lot of times when people were entering data, especially if you had one of those really big, long attributes or dimensions, you were having to really slog through a lot of rollups that you didn't need to see. Now you can simply enter data without those miscellaneous rollups. For planning purposes, we can also make formulas based on attributes. So I could say, okay, now take the number of quantity for the China products and multiply it by a certain rate, or I can take the number of products for Taiwan and multiply it by a different rate. Also for planning purposes, we can set up attributes, restrictions based on those attributes. So for instance, in my demo model, I have it set up where Canada doesn't see group C. And so we can just set up those groupings and very easily get some of those restrictions set up. We've already, with clients, been using the dimension attributes quite successfully, and we're finding that it does make for faster and more robust modeling. So that pretty well covers the first two releases that came out this year. I'd like to also preview the third release coming up. Next slide, Brian. So in the third release, they're going to be extending that search capability to the cube and modeled sheets, so you can easily find an account level dimension value on these large sheets. They're going to be making more UI improvements in the discovery, some basically a new summary table with some new time subtotals. With sheets and reports, they're optimizing performance so that things run faster. Good news for those of you with very large models. And then there's some API updates coming in. What that means in plain English is if you have a connector built where you're updating data, they're going to be updating what connectors can do now so that connectors will actually be able to automate GL account updates with some of the account properties. And we can also, through the API, add GL accounts. Very good news for those of you who, after you import actuals, say, oh no, I need to go back and add this GL account. The API has been updated so we can automate that process. Not sure if I hear any applause or not because we have everybody on mute. So just summing up on the next slide, we looked at the updates that already came in. We're especially excited about the dimension attributes capability. We've already been using it. And if you do need some assistance with dimension attributes, there's a couple little quirks with them or other modeling updates. Feel free to contact your Menino project manager, or I can always reach out to me as well. And we're also excited about the features coming up. You know, it's great to have the search capability for all the sheets coming up. And for those of you who automate those data imports, it'll be nice to have the ability to automate the account updates. So with that, can open it up for any questions that you may have.
It looks like actually, Amy, our audience is a little bit shy today. We got a lot of comments, but no questions for you so far. So if anybody does have any questions, definitely feel free to submit them now. But if not, we will put Amy's contact info up on the screen here in just a moment so that if you did have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to her directly. We actually, so actually someone did just submit a question, so I spoke a little too soon on that. It says they can no longer use modeled reports because of Java. Do you know when that will be fixed, Amy?
Adaptive is very aggressively writing the Java out of the software. One of the reasons is that Chrome is basically not working well with Java at all. So there's a very aggressive effort to get Java out. I don't know the exact timing on the model sheets though, but let me find out and I will get back to you on that.
And any idea why auto upload for currency rates was included only for discovery but not for insights?
Is that for the NetSuite?
They didn't put a lot of background on
Okay.
that one. Yes, actually, yes, it looks like it is.
I am not sure why they only included it for discovery and not for the adaptive. I do know that they have a progression, a timeline in mind, and they are going to be migrating it though to the standard API. So it will be coming soon to planning. And I will follow up with you on what the timing is.
Great. Well, thank you, Amy, for both of those. And thank you to all of you who submitted questions and comments. We like the comments too. Those are helpful. So we'll go ahead and put Amy's contact info up here. If anyone does have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to her after this. And like Amy mentioned, she'll get back to those last two questions that we had with some updates for you both. As we close today's webinar, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen. Definitely please take a moment to let us know how today's webinar went. We'd like to be able to continue providing you great content in these webinars, so we want to make sure that it's content that you like to hear. And of course, as I mentioned earlier today, we did record today's webinar, so we will be sending out both Amy's slides as well as a recording of the webinar if you'd like to see it again, or if you just want to share it with some of your colleagues who couldn't make it today. So with that, we'll go ahead and close just a bit early today. Thank you so much, Amy, for your participation, your great content today, and thank you to all of our audience for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it.